Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to call our regular council meeting on Tuesday, November 12th to order at 6 p.m. I am Mayor Cliff McNeil-Smith, and colleagues, good evening to colleagues in the chamber this evening. To my far left is Councillor Richard Novick, Councillor Terry O'Keefe, Councillor Chad Rentoul. To my right is Councillor Scott Garnett. Councillor Sarah Duncan is joining us via electronic this evening. Good evening, Councillor Duncan. And Councillor Steve Duck will not be attending this evening with other commitments. I would say good evening to staff in attendance this evening. I would just like to acknowledge our CAO, Mr. Edwards, our corporate officer, Ms. Nelson, our Director of Community Planning, Mr. Newcomb, Director of Development Services, Ms. Verhagen, Director of Engineering, Ms. Clary, Director of Finance, Mr. Hissick, Manager of Communications, Ms. Judson, and Manager of Finance, Ms. Chen. And good evening to members of the public here in attendance in the chamber and to those who might be watching the live web stream or watching a recording of this meeting at a later date. I'd next like to respectfully acknowledge that we are holding our meeting this evening, and indeed the entire town of Sidney is in the territory of the Wasanich nations. And we respectfully acknowledge the Sayote Nation, the Sartlip Nation, the Pakwachin Nation, the Sycam Nation, and the Malahat Nation. Council, before going to approval of the agenda, I would like to make some brief remarks. It was with great sadness that we learned today that former Premier John Horgan passed away after his fight against cancer. And on behalf of Council, we want to send our heartfelt condolences and sympathies to the family of John Horgan. We are flying our Canadian flag at half-mast at the municipal buildings in the town of Sidney. And as a further measure of respect as elected representatives to local government who work with the province ministers and the Premier, we would like to additionally show our respect for the community service, or the service that and commitment and dedication that John Horgan gave to his community and to the province by observing a moment of silence, please. And thank you to everyone for that this evening. And next, turning to approval of the agenda, we do have some changes to the agenda since it was published last Thursday. And Council, I would like to put forward a motion to amend the agenda, so I so move that item 13B, the residential parking permit pilot program, be referred to a future COW meeting. With a seconder, I would then motivate.
I'll second.
Moved or seconded by Councillor Novick. This excellent report that we received from staff that is on the agenda this evening brings forward a recommendation that came out of a parking study that was done for the downtown and adjacent residential areas last year to consider implementing a residential parking pilot program. In the report, there is priorities and a particular location identified. And given that this is new for Council in terms of the different options of a residential permit program, I think it would be beneficial to have this presented at a committee of the whole meeting and making area residents aware that this is an item coming before Council. After that consideration, if we had considered it tonight, there could have been a recommendation to take it to further consideration at the budget meetings next late winter and early fall. I'll turn to colleagues if there's any discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. So item 13B is removed from our agenda this evening. The second item, the second amendment I would like to make is that we receive the 23 letters of correspondence from residents regarding Allbay Road. That we receive the letters from residents regarding Allbay Road, and they will be placed under item 14A, which is correspondence, which means council will have some discussion of them. So that's part one of the motion. Part two of the motion is that we move the 4 letters from residents regarding Allbay Road that are in the agenda package when it was published on Thursday. So the 23 letters that I first made reference to were received since the agenda was published last Thursday, but there were 4 letters on the agenda. So my motion is to receive, to place both of those sets of letters under item 14A. And as part of that motion, part 3 is that 2 letters regarding item 6A, the Colinwood wiring project, or wiring variance request, be placed under 6A. If I could have a seconder for that motion, please.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Garnett. Is there any discussion? I just want to say that to the folks who did provide submissions, whether they were in emails to Mayor and Council, whether it was sent to admin, whether it was sent to our Director of Engineering. If it came to the town, it's been placed on the agenda. I could sit here and read the 23 names of the residents, and it is in the agenda for the 4 residents who did submit for the agenda. But rest assured, when we receive correspondence from residents that's directed toward Mayor and Council, that is directed towards business that will be on the agenda, that your correspondence will be placed on the agenda. For future reference, you can send it to Mayor and Council, but sending it to admin@sydney.ca is our legislative process whereby staff then place that on the agenda, and Council will see all of that correspondence prior to the meeting to give consideration to it. So thank you for that. With no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor of receiving that correspondence? Thank you. The motion carries. The next item I have is to move item 14A. So all of that correspondence that we just placed under item 14A, I'm making a motion to move that from where it's typically located towards the end of the agenda to the next item on the agenda. Given that we have folks in the chamber from the neighborhood here today, there may be people watching on the live web stream. And so if I could have a seconder for that motion, please.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. And with that, I would seek a motion to approve our agenda as amended, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. So we are now turning to that item, those items of correspondence, those submissions from residents. And I would like to place the following, or move the following recommendation. And with a seconder, I will motivate for the intention and purpose of the motion. So the motion is that Allbay Road residents, that neighborhood residents and businesses, that Allbay Road neighborhood residents and businesses be invited to a future committee of the whole meeting regarding the Allbay Road parking situation in the October 28th staff report on the Allbay Road parking.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Thank you. I want to begin by thanking all of the residents for your correspondence, for your information, and speak to the process that occurred at the October 28th meeting, whereby staff provided a detailed report with some options, not exploring every possible option, but with some options, and making a recommendation. The recommendation was to forward it, and additional information would come forward to council during budget deliberations typically in February, some portion of February and into March. And at budget deliberations, we welcome the public's involvement in all matters involved in our budget deliberations. And it wasn't a final decision made by council to move forward with recommendations or options, particular options in the staff report. It was to forward it to the budget deliberations. That was the resolution by council. It wasn't to approve it. It was to forward it with additional budget information to those deliberations. I appreciate there were members from the neighborhood at that council meeting. Some made remarks. There were submissions, written submissions at that meeting. And while council gave its views at that meeting, I feel that given how the community, the neighborhood has reached out with your concerns, which are understandable given the changes and options that are proposed, that we have this item referred to a committee of the whole meeting. Committee of the whole meetings look just like what we see today. Council will sit here, but we will sit here as committee. And as committee, we do not take final decisions. And so invitations will go to the neighborhood residents of the date of that meeting. I'm suggesting it will be in January, perhaps in the last half of January, as we're getting closer to the Christmas season, and we have a limited number of committee of the whole meetings left in November and December. And that will provide an opportunity for residents to express their view. There will be a staff report at that time. I expect the same information. Staff may choose to bring some additional information at that time. But then we will provide the opportunity to listen to your concerns. And as we do as committee, we deliberate on the matters, on the options. And we do pass motions at committee of the whole, but those are recommendations to council. And our council procedure, as provided in provincial government legislation, is for us to take that matter to the next council meeting to take a final decision or make other recommendations. So I hope that provides helpful information to residents in attendance this evening. Please feel free to share that word. We will be corresponding in the coming weeks on that. To residents and businesses. I will turn to my colleagues if there's any additional comment. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm supportive of the motion. I think we've seen correspondence. I think you noted some 24 pieces of correspondence received, and we had a couple of individuals who attended last meeting when this subject came up, but I suspect there are others in the community who would like the opportunity to come forward, and so this gives us the opportunity to provide notice not only to residents but also to the employers in that area, and hopefully we can have a more fulsome and respectful discussion with all parties at that time. And I appreciate you noting that at this point these are recommendations that are yet to be approved as part of budget, and I'm thankful to the community for coming out this evening and look forward to the ongoing dialogue. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm supportive of the motion. In reading the correspondence that comes through, there's definitely some concern. I also noted that there may be some misunderstandings about what may or may not take place there. So I think it's a good opportunity for council and staff to provide more detail and clarification on what may or may not take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. The only additional remark I meant to make speaking the first time was that the town of Sidney, apart from our annual operational budget, has a capital budget that is in the neighborhood of $10 million a year and is in the neighborhood of 100 projects. Some of those projects are fairly large. For example, the traffic circle at Beacon Avenue West was perhaps our largest single project in quite some time, and another one might be a sewer pump station, change out or something, or some under road construction. So one of the considerations that would have come before council is, particularly with the budget, any budget information on options in hand, is how do when our staff are maxed out with capital projects in the community and responding to urgent issues that arise, is with regards to Allbay Road, is timing and actual actual budget implications haven't been discussed yet. But whatever is done, or if action is taken, it will have to be considered amongst all of the other priorities that we have within the capital plans as we continue this year and we go into next year's capital plan and consider that at budget time. Not seeing any further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion carries unanimous. Thank you. So we are now turning back to the regular agenda and item 4. Item 4 is public participation, where we provide residents an opportunity to come forward and address council for up to 4 minutes. We ask that you provide your name and the municipality that you reside in or the organization that you represent. I appreciate there are residents from the Allbay neighborhood this evening, and you are still invited to speak if you wish. And so for a first time, I will ask if there's anyone wishing to come forward to address council. Please come forward. That's great. Thank you. There is a button just on the microphone to make it live. We are recording the meeting, so just at the bottom there. There we go.
Good evening. My name is Ingrid Tanner. I live at 10456 Allbay Road and have for almost 29 years. I want to start by saying, as many people, that I was absolutely flabbergasted when I read the resolution that was passed by this council on October 28th regarding the parking concerns in the residential neighborhood of Allbay Road, especially without any meaningful public engagement from the residents of the Allbay Road neighborhood, who will all be adversely affected. Disturbingly, the engineering department specifically recommended council to not engage with the residents. As evidenced by our petition, many, if not most, of the residents of Allbay Road and the surrounding cul-de-sacs are deeply concerned with and oppose Town Council's resolutions that were passed on October 28th to widen the gravel shoulders on Allbay Road from Resthaven to Jocelyn to accommodate parking on the boulevard. And I understand it was also on the other side for pedestrian. The council's decision was made hastily during a council meeting that the majority of Allbay residents were not even aware of, and without consultation and or consideration of the needs and interests of Allbay residents, the taxpayers who will be deeply and permanently affected by the outcome of this resolution. According to the town's report to council, the recommendations to install gravel parking along Allbay Road reflects the verbatim behest of Philbrook's Boatyard Management as per letter written by Jamie Hansen to the manager of engineering dated October 18th to accommodate the parking needs of his employees. We're residential, they're marine industrial, I can't forget that. The council then took this recommendation and made it a resolution. This is an affront to Allbay residents whose numerous concerns have been largely ignored and whose neighborhood would be drastically and negatively affected were this proposed resolution to be imposed. Fundamentally, the provision of employee parking by an employer is a commercial matter that should be the responsibility of the employer to resolve and not come at the degradation of neighboring residential properties and resulting diminished use and enjoyment of the residential property by the respective owners and taxpayers. To date, that problem has been hoisted on the nearby residents with a further decision to make such an unfair, unsafe imposition permanent. There were 3 options that the engineering department's report to council were stated as options that could be considered by council as low-cost alternatives. I don't believe these were explored, and I know you're going forward, which is appreciated. There should have been more options available that serve the residents of this neighborhood. As there are only 4 streets in Sidney with this special street design, residential-only parking on Allbay would not set a precedent for the majority of parking in Sidney. This option would be the cost of signage, a far more fiscally responsible use of taxpayers' money, and would satisfy the residents of the Allbay Road neighborhood. And a letter to Jamie Hansen to direct his staff to stop using Allbay Road as their staff parking lot. The street should be utilized and maintained for residential use, such as service vehicles, delivery, maintenance, visitors, etc. This would keep the road clear for all pedestrian, bicycle, mobility device traffic, and emergency vehicles. The ultimate idea here should be safety. Restricting on-street parking from the marine industrial zone in this residential neighborhood is going to keep the number of vehicles off the boulevards, grassy or gravel, improving sightlines for residents exiting their driveways, and improving sightlines at the Allbay-Bowden intersection, and help reduce the speeding traffic. The purpose of a boulevard is safety. There's a boulevard between a roadway and a residence so vehicles can exit onto the road safely, with sightlines to all oncoming traffic, motorized or not. When there are vehicles parked on the boulevards, be them grass or gravel, you have now impaired those sightlines and have now created an unsafe situation for residents exiting their driveway. A significant part of Allbay's road and charm and beauty is due to the investments of time and money made by residents to create an aesthetically pleasing boulevard. widening the shoulders on Allbay Road to accommodate gravel parking and to create a gravel pedestrian lane would involve the partial demolition of 64 residential lawns and gardens. A lot.
So
And
you are
degrade.
coming, you are
To
coming
4
to your
minutes?
4
Okay, yeah,
you're
that's
coming to
fine.
your 4 minutes. So
Okay,
we appreciate your,
I know,
we
I-
appreciate your written correspondence we received. We appreciate
Yes.
you taking the time to attend in person
okay,
and address council, and I hope the previous directions that council have
Yes.
taken will help. I just want to reiterate that it wasn't a final decision on October 28th.
yeah,
The staff comment about engagement was engagement at this time, which was, at this time.
yeah,
That doesn't preclude engagement when the item comes before budget in next February and March.
Perfect.
I've said that now for a second time, so I won't repeat it.
yes, that's fine, yeah,
But thank you again for
Yeah.
coming forward.
okay. I enjoyed this. That's the petition.
Thank you. I'll call for a second time for anyone wishing to come forward, please.
My name is Paul McLaughlin. I'm a resident on Jocelyn, so that's in the Allbay area. When I heard about this proposal to increase the parking along Allbay, I looked at the report from the engineering department and I noted that the planning department did not sign off on it. Finance signed off on it, administration signed off on it, but it wasn't put to planning. So I spent some time on the official community plan today and on the zoning bylaw, and I couldn't find a single policy or objective that would support the idea of the marine industrial area along Harbor Road being allowed to foist its parking problem onto the residential area along Allbay, which is, in addition to being residential, is also an environmentally sensitive zone. So, if,
Sorry,
So-
I'm just going to take a point to interject. Applause is really not appropriate. We appreciate that the residents are here from the neighborhood. We've received and we're having a respectful discussion. Applause is not necessary at the meeting. Thank you.
so to wrap up, because I don't want to take more than my 4 minutes, I would hope that the planning department would be able to identify the planning principles and the planning objectives and policies from your own documents that would support the engineering department's proposal and have that available for the January committee of the whole meeting, which I support. I think that's an excellent move on your part.
Thank you for coming forward and for your remarks. I'll ask for a next speaker to come forward. Good evening.
Dr. Gary Froese. I'm the co-president of the Sidney by the Sea Rotary Club, and I'm a taxpayer in Central Saanich. Your worship and honorable members of council, I believe that you are not being well served by the staff report on the installation of a peace pole, hence my presentation tonight. I found the staff response to the peace pole project to be somewhat trite, petty, parochial, and surprisingly narrow-minded, and constructed with flawed reasoning. In contrast, I would invite you to listen to the following statement excerpted from a UNESCO website on peace, which encapsulates the essence of this project. The Constitution of UNESCO starts with the notion that wars begin in the minds of people. So it is in the minds of people that the defenses of peace must be constructed. It is this notion that framed the theme and logo of this year's observance of the International Day of Peace. The ideas of peace, the culture of peace, need to be cultivated in the minds of children and communities through formal and informal education across countries and generations. Would the town of Sidney's response not be more appropriately couched in the form of a question to staff and council, such as, what else can we do as a community to promote the importance and implications of a peace culture in our community? Should we perhaps draw more attention to the United Nations International Day of Peace, which was September the 21st in 2024. Should the installation of a peace pole not be but the beginning of such efforts? A small price. Furthermore, I would not personally categorize a peace pole as being a work of art. It sounds as if staff has been searching for some category in which to place this monument, preferably one which presents the idea in a context of being inappropriate. Secondly, as for the statement of "may peace prevail on earth" being associated with a religious sentiment, appears to reflect a viewpoint of world affairs from a very narrowly educated perspective. As regards the choice of language, surely we should be able to come up with a handful of languages which would not elicit negative political responses. After all, according to the Ethnologue Guide, there are 7,139 officially known languages in the world. Our recommendation upon further reflection would be, why not use Canada's 2 official languages and the language of the First Nations, the Senchosan, upon whose territory we stand, and only with their agreement, of course. And in fact, we are now in possession of such wording duly approved by elders of that community. As regards the presence of the Rotary logo, most communities are pleased to indicate on monuments such as this that they have the support of local service clubs, indicating a strong sense of building community in a positive and collaborative manner. Please remember that Rotary is a global network of over 46,000 local clubs with 1.4 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and specifically problem solvers who see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change, one step at a time, in themselves, in their communities, and across the globe. We have a track record. Witness the worldwide Rotary End Polio Now campaign, where we are now down to 3 remaining countries globally: Afghanistan, Pakistan, and most recently Gaza. So we have a track record.
Sir, I would ask you to come close to completing your
Sure.
4-minute remarks.
We are presently looking at more than 250,000 peace poles being posted in 180 countries all over the world. I would ask you, what could be more important and appropriate for a community to espouse than to work toward peace for humankind? I would strongly and respectfully suggest that Council and its staff spend a little more effort in reviewing this proposal. Is this request not particularly poignant and apropos, given the context of having just observed Remembrance Day this week? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks. I do have 1 or 2 comments to make. One is we greatly appreciate you coming forward and providing your remarks. However, remarks to the effect that staff have been trite, that staff are uneducated, are inappropriate remarks. You can certainly make the case forward for the project, but to criticize staff in that manner is, I believe, is inappropriate. And I just ask you to reconsider that in your future remarks. Thank you. I will ask for a 3rd and final time if anyone wishing to come forward, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have a voice. Thank you particularly for the stewardship that you offer on behalf of this town.
If you could provide your name and...
My name is Tom Noseworthy, and I live on 10473 Allbay Road, and I have for 15 years. I guess there's one thing everybody in this room would agree on tonight. We have a parking problem on Allbay Road. And in the 15 years I've lived there, it certainly has gotten worse. Any given morning when I walk on Allbay Road, between 8 and 9, there'll be 14 pickup trucks between Borden and Jocelyn. I believe that the decision that you've made this evening is very appropriate. I want to thank you for that. Then I want to make sure that when that time comes, that we have a full opportunity for input. None of us are experts on parking, but we have to live our lives on Allbay Road, and it's a sensitive area. Thank you for the decision you've made tonight.
Thank you for coming forward. Please come forward. Council, I would ask, please Just before you come forward, Councillor Garnett,
I'll move to extend the public participation period.
A second.
all in favor? The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I'll be brief. Danny Gill and I live in Sidney. I'm speaking tonight on two issues on the agenda. Item 5A, short-term rental bylaw, and item 13C, the housing needs assessment. I was very pleased to see the short-term rental package come forward to Council. The proposals significantly strengthen our existing bylaw. In fact, it gives us some teeth to actually have some outcomes. It requires businesses to have a business license, short-term rentals, safety inspections, monitoring to ensure compliance, and in fact puts them on the same footing as hotels in many respects. So it's a really good process going forward. Hopefully, this will lead to more rental accommodation coming to the market that we desperately need. So I'm encouraging Council to support the amendments to the town's business bylaw that are coming forward to you later this evening. Housing needs assessment. The timing of this issue is being driven by the calendar set up by the provincial government and in terms of getting the document through. The document is extremely well done. I was very impressed. It is comprehensive. It's a real challenge. It updates the state of housing in Sidney. There's a lot of data in there. Things like changing demographics, the growing need for more worker housing, or the consistently growing need. It includes overviews of steps taken to date by the town to address these challenges, things like development cost charges and other fees. It really notes that the challenges lie in the near market and especially the below market rental sectors and supporting housing for seniors. Finally, the report sets out 3 strategies for going forward, as well as 3 spotlight solutions. And this is really intriguing, looking at what 3 municipalities have done, or a couple of municipalities in these areas, trying to push forward to achieve concrete outcomes in addressing this challenge. And I think that was a very excellent idea. I think all in all, I want to thank staff for pulling this together. As I said, it's a fabulous document. I think it will hopefully provide a really good roadmap for going forward, some ideas that we can pull together. And I think 2 or 3 wins would help in making this thing work. In closing, I note that North Saanish's report on this issue was a page and a half. Puts things in perspective. I think you're really taking the lead in this process, and I congratulate the staff of the town for doing that. And I hope the council will approve the report and authorize staff to submit it to the province. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming forward, Mr. Challoner. And for last time, is there anyone wishing to come forward to address council? Seeing none, we'll close the public participation period. People who came to speak of public participation and wish to leave are welcome to do so. We do have a longer agenda this evening, and
It's not rude.
but I can tell you and the next item on the agenda is a policing report from our RCMP detachment commander. So
Thank you.
we understand if you haven't had dinner yet.
Well, we thought, thank you guys.
Thank you. So we're next turning to item 4D1, which is the third quarter policing report for 2024. We're pleased to welcome Staff Sergeant Conley, Detachment Commander of our Sidney North Saanich RCMP Detachment. Welcome and good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm happy to be back and to provide a little bit of an update on policing services for the community. I'll try and keep my remarks brief, as I know you've got a busy agenda tonight. I always like to introduce some comments about our resource situation. So 2024 has been an unprecedented year in hiring new employees, filling staffing vacancies from employees leaving to accept other positions, and there's been transfers and promotions. And in 2024, we have now been successful in filling 4 administrative support positions, and the work to internally train these employees is underway. 7 new officers have transferred into the detachment since May this year, so I'm happy to report on that. They're filling vacancies that were created back in 2023 and into 2024. Some of the changes that you might like to be aware of is that there was a promotion into our second in command operations NCO position. Sergeant Duncan Ferguson is now the new operations commander. We have a new major crimes supervisor, Corporal Jessica Skolmoski, and we have a new person in the community policing role. That's Constable Matthew Slowey. And Constable Tim Cosgrove, who many of you will know, has moved into our Indigenous policing unit. So some changes, internal changes happening. There still remains 2 positions to be staffed, one of which will be by promotion. That's in progress right now. There are also unoccupied positions resulting from officers on long-term medical leave or limited to administrative duties. So we continue to carry those challenges as well. I did want to add that the traffic position remains unfilled. We're optimistic that we're going to get to that point and fill that in the first half of 2025. It's our goal. The detachment currently has 3 casual guards providing prisoner care and cell block services as required. We have several projects, but 3 that I thought I'd mention. So the community will be receiving an EV vehicle for general duty policing. We're considered a pilot detachment for that. We've been working with the town staff about the installation of charging stations at the detachment. I did want to mention that the EV vehicle receiving is, because it's a pilot, is at no cost to the municipality. So we're receiving that, although we know there are other expenses such as the charging stations. The interview room project is hopefully going to see some traction. It's been a project that has been uncompleted for some time. It isn't going as well as I would hope, but we hope that we're seeing some traction on that now. And body-worn cameras, I think, is something that there's been media about. We are expected as a detachment to see a rollout of that, barring any other delays, in April of this coming year. Our major case investigations, the major crime unit has been busy investigating and compiling disclosures on a number of larger files: sex assault, possession of child pornography, child exploitation, and drug trafficking files through 2024. Just by way of mentioning, the BC policing standards set out requirements for major case management: to have a trained and experienced primary investigator, a file coordinator, and a team commander with experience for these categories of offenses. And in community policing, Constable Matt Slowey moved into that role at the beginning of October, taking over those duties that were handled by Constable Cosgrove. So he has been engaged in school liaison, crime prevention programs, community outreach, which is significant for our community, and advancing fraud awareness is just some of the duties in this role. In recent weeks, there has been an increase in the number of unhoused individuals in the community. In the past month, Constable Slowey was engaged in traffic safety initiatives with ICBC, participation in an emergency response exercise at the Victoria Airport, and has been liaising with the ministry outreach worker, which comes out to our community on a weekly basis. I thought I'd mention about Block Watch, just the status of that. Our volunteer coordinator has provided an update on community participation in the program. There are 19 Block Watch groups in Sidney. There are a total of 582 residential properties participating within these 19 neighborhoods. Each group has a Block Watch captain, and messages are provided regarding property crimes and that have been reported in their neighborhoods. The Block Watch captains fan out this information to their groups and often assist with the reporting of theft, vandalism, suspicious or abandoned vehicles or boats. I think yesterday we received an email about youths on the roof of a condo that had had a series of thefts and break and enter. So just one illustration of how Block Watch can help us, although it would have been nice to have got that report at the time. Our detachment is in, oh, I'm sorry, I missed a piece. I thought I would mention about integrated teams that both Sidney and North Saanich support. There was an article in the paper the other day that may have been seen. So my comments are that for several years, both Sidney and North Saanich have contributed financially to support these integrated teams, which provide expertise in high-risk areas to all police agencies in the CRD. These teams include the Regional Domestic Violence Unit, the Integrated Mobile Crisis Response Team, which deals with mental health, and the Mobile Youth Services Team. Each team has a specific mandate to assist with high-risk investigations or persons in crisis situations for mental health, domestic violence, or child exploitation. Both West Shore RCMP and Central Saanich Police have recently announced their withdrawal from participation in these integrated teams for differing reasons. It is anticipated the costs of our continued participation will increase as a result of these withdrawals unless service levels are changed. Our detachment is in progress of completing a three-year review of the assistance provided by these integrated teams. This review will include an evaluation of alternate approaches and options for managing these specialized and high-risk investigations or crisis situations. Based on our findings and potential solutions, we will report to Mayor and Council prior to any withdrawal of service from the integrated teams. We will continue to receive the integrated team services for 2025. That commitment has already been made. However, we will need to announce any withdrawal by the summer of 2025 for withdrawal in 2026, if that was decided. And then just touching on the crime statistical report, that the last one that would have been out in October. The number of crimes against persons has dropped significantly during the first, so crimes against persons has dropped significantly during the first 9 months of 2024. While assault offenses remained at similar levels to the previous year, threats, harassment, and sex assaults, all those categories declined. In 2024, property crime went in the opposite direction, with fraud, vandalism, shoplifting, and theft offenses all on the increase. Break and enter crimes, however, in both residential and commercial properties remain at very low levels. During 2024, we continue to see the number of victims of fraud scam increasing. That's not what we're looking for. Over the summer months, fraud scam awareness was provided at the weekly street market. We weren't there every week, but we were there most weeks. Information on fraud scam trends was circulated through email to the Block Watch participants. A previous initiative to provide monthly video clips through Sidney and North Saanich social media coordinators is being planned. There was actually a meeting at the detachment this morning about that, so that we can move that initiative forward. Our crime prevention efforts to inform and promote awareness of scam trends will continue to be a priority. We know our financial business partners in the community are actively engaged and diligent in preventative measures as well. On the traffic, with traffic matters in mind, we had 0 fatal accidents within the town of Sidney in 2024. The number of traffic accidents remained at similar levels to 2023. The one high crash location, as indicated in the report, remains to be at Highway 17 and Beacon Avenue, where there were 11 collisions in so far this year. The majority of accidents at this location are rear end collisions. The number of drinking driver impairment investigations declined 20% in 2024. That'd be partly attributed to our staffing levels. And both impaired driving and aggressive driving remain detachment policing priorities, and with enhanced initiatives over the remainder of 2024. And that concludes my update report on policing services.
Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, and thank you for the report, Staff Sergeant. You mentioned the homeless population increasing, so I'm interested in hearing a bit more about that. Just, I see a lot of evidence of that around the town and on social media, people in the community talking about that as well. Have you got a sense of how much of an increase there has been, and is this attributable to the sort of the crackdown that they have on Pandora Street or other reasons?
I think there may be a link to that. I don't know firsthand, but secondhand, I'm hearing that there is some sort of changes in the downtown core about how some of the unhoused in the community are being dispersed to outlying areas or alternate locations. What I can tell you is that we just took a little bit of a snapshot, and we have had, since the beginning of October to date, so 6 weeks, 46 contact with 46 unhoused individuals within both Sidney and North Saanich, so not just Sidney. And some of those are multiple contacts that we've had. We do have some new individuals that have come to the community that are unhoused. So we don't, what we do is we extend our outreach, and we're making contact with those individuals, trying to support them and see through outreach what might be able to be helped. But it's fairly evident that they've chosen to come here. They maybe have felt that they didn't feel safe in the other locations where they were at, and that may be part of the reason for being here at this time. But we are seeing an increase in calls related to it. It's just, it's something we've really noticed in the last few weeks.
Right, and I'm wondering, so my understanding is there's someone from the provincial government that comes out once a week and goes along with one of your staff to check in on these folks. And I'm thinking about cold weather coming, and I'm wondering if those provincial people, maybe this is out of your bailiwick, but whether they've talked at all about BC Housing or the provincial government doing more out here in terms of sheltering those individuals during the extreme weather that might be coming our way.
I don't know about the provincial government piece other than the outreach worker that comes weekly. In our detachment, we have our community policing officer who engages on a daily basis to provide support. I do know that we have a plan to, if we run into an extreme weather event, we have a plan about how we will try to reach out to those people in advance of the extreme weather. Like usually there's a forecast of at least a couple or 3 days of that event happening, to help them, support them and make plans, but also then once the extreme weather arrives, to be able to reach out to them to see if there's support that they can be provided to a shelter in the downtown area, and to provide or engage them in transportation. We have bus tickets that we may provide them. So different supports to make sure that we don't have individuals who are exposed that want to seek help.
Okay.
So kind of a 2 or 3 step plan there.
Okay, so I think, my recollection is that similar approach last year's where we gave them bus fare or whatever to go downtown. And I presume that if we wanted to do something in terms of offering something here, that would have to be something that I presume council would have to initiate. So, as probably out of your bailiwick then.
I think so.
Yeah, okay, thanks. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Conley, for your detailed report as usual. A couple of questions. With regard to the hospital wait times under the mental health response area, and seeing a significant increase from last year in section 28, almost, it's a little more than double actually in terms of wait times for officers. And I was reading and I was wondering, so when we, our officers take people to the hospital, is it just strictly San Pen, or do they have to take them to RJH as well?
Once we have apprehended someone under Section 28, they must be taken to Royal Jubilee Hospital, where there is the psychiatric assessment done there. I can mention that there were some efforts on the part of Chief Manick in Victoria to meet with Island Health and the hospital security. And there is right now, it just actually started here about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the security at the hospital are assigned to meet with officers when they arrive to try and facilitate, some expediting of the process. It's too early to tell whether that's going to make a difference for policing, but yeah, the wait times is a huge impact, especially to the smaller departments, because if we're at a minimum staffing level, and we can have an officer tied up there for 3, 4, 5 hours at times, it's a huge impact. So it's been a long time, and it's really not had the type of resolutions that you would like to see and expect to see, but it's tied into so many other factors, right?
Yeah, and so the reason I was looking at it is I figured, I have a family member in law enforcement and who actually started as a security officer at RGH. So when they look at the numbers in terms of wait time, it isn't even taking into consideration the drive there and the drive back. So it's right. So I'm glad to hear that there's something being done. I was hoping that different ministries would come up with some kind of solution so our officers could actually be here in our community more than sitting in a hospital waiting, and as you said, you're not having full staffing levels. It has a real impact on our community. So thank you for that update.
Really has a lot to do with capacity there at the hospital.
So the other area I wanted to talk about was the theft over under shoplifting, and I was wondering, are these predominantly repeat offenders, or are you finding these are like new people each time?
Mainly new, I think, although, it's a bit of a combination of both, I guess, to say that. We had someone recently, and it was a series of theft offenses that a person was involved with. So we have that, but we also have these sort of one-off theft offenses that are happening here, but they could be happening and sometimes do happen in other locations as well. So, but shoplifting is definitely something that we're seeing an impact from, an increase in, and I think that's sort of probably across the board. I think we're not the only community that's seeing that sort of trend.
Yeah, I having sat through an SBIA meeting, it actually came up in how they will actually communicate with each other through emails to watch out for certain people as they go from store to store, and I'm not sure what advice you give to the organizations, but I know the Shaw Center, and it came out from the person who manages the Shaw Center store, that they had gone through a process where they just wanted to increase accessibility, so they opened up the store. But a positive aspect of it is that when at the end of the year, they found their losses in income had dropped substantially because people had visibility and a much greater ability to see the store and see potential shoplifting that happened. So, yeah, it's a challenge, and I feel for you having to deal with it, and our businesses. It impacts everybody's bottom line. So I appreciate your report, appreciate your answers, and thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I do encourage our businesses to be reporting the shoplifting offenses at the time and let the police decide, the type of action. Some businesses have chosen to just ban people, but there's some advantages to having the police involved and being able to look at the situation and the history in order to decide what's the best course of action in dealing with it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Garnett has reminded me that I had heard a report of somebody who had been camping with their tent on a street, on a main street, and people were kind of quite shocked and horrified to see somebody camping in such a prominent location. And I said, well, it would depend what time, because as far as I knew, the police will kind of do a check and, you know, speak to people, move them along if they need to be, you know, and that there's like a rule that they have to be packed up by a certain time, and the police will kind of move people along. Did I give the correct answer for that? Because I don't think, like, the idea that the police are going to, you know, arrest somebody, or that somebody's committing the kind of crime that's going to result in a kind of an action by the police isn't really seem to be the policy that's in place, that it's more a matter of people are not allowed to camp for 24 hours in a location, and they're going to be kind of checking to see what kind of, you know, activities they might be doing, and that they're not criminalizing the existence of homeless people being visible, I guess is what I was trying to say, but that people are not going to be allowed to stay in one location. Can you kind of provide what the process would be in that eventuality, so that kind of when the public might see somebody, they understand how the police are maybe already aware, or how they may be dealing with these people, and that simply the presence of or existence of a homeless person doesn't necessarily mean that something negative is happening?
Sure. Well, I guess I would start by saying the police do not have an authority to move people along because they're on a local street, or whether they're sitting there, or maybe sort of somewhat encamped there. But there are bylaws that the community has that do allow some levels of enforcement if they're impeding the street, or they have chattels that are blocking the passage of people passing by. So I think it's important to make that distinction. I'm aware that we had an individual that was camped at the on the highway, on the sort of the boulevard into Sidney for the last few days. We've been engaged with that person a few times. We engaged with them again today, and we try to work with them, and so we've, I think, been successful today to have them relocate. I think the other pieces are, you know, there are provisions about camping in parks, and the bylaws that are enforceable within parks, and that they're not to be able to be camped there without violating some of the provisions within our Sidney Parks bylaw. So there definitely are some areas where the enforcement can be applied, and hopefully I'm sort of giving you some clarity.
Yeah, I think so. In this case, it would be, say, a tent, or, you know, even a person who didn't have a tent and a sleeping bag and a tarp or something. If they were encamped, I guess, on a sidewalk in a residential or a commercial area, is that the kind of thing where the bylaw enforcement is they cannot stay there for 24 hours? They can't prevent people from getting into their business or walking down the sidewalk. You know, they can't start, you know, basically pitch a tent and declare that their campsite. But that simply having a sleeping area like a tent or a tarp that was there overnight and packed up in the morning isn't going to result in enforcement?
Yeah, so the bylaws, you know, I'd want to refresh myself with exactly the way those bylaws are worded. Certainly, one thing we have to make a distinction about is whether a person is on private property or if they're not on private property. So when a person is on private property, then either through direction from the property owner, the Trespass Act can be applied, and it's enforceable. And we find that with some areas within downtown Sidney, they're actually They're considered private property. For example, not Safeway, Save on Foods, sorry. Save on Foods area, all that area is considered private property. It then reverts to simply bylaw enforcement for other areas that are municipal streets, municipal sidewalks. So that would be how we would have to navigate that part forward. And the parks has a separate bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Seeing no further discussion, I want to again thank Staff Sergeant Conley for presenting to Council this evening and taking our questions. And
Thank you.
And thank you for the professional service to our community.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Have a great meeting.
Thank you. We're now turning to Section 5 under bylaws, and the first item is under 5A is bylaw number 2283, which is amendment number 4 to our business bylaw, number 2119, to include short-term rentals as a business requiring a license. We have a report from our Director of Community Planning, and I will turn to Mr. Newcomb now for an introduction, please.
Thank you. So the report provides an overview of proposed amendments to business license bylaw number 2119 to bring in business licensing for short-term rentals in Sidney. Short-term rentals are already regulated in Sidney through zoning bylaw 2275, which permits short-term rentals in most residential areas with conditions. Staff estimate there are currently approximately 100 to 150 short-term rentals in Sidney right now. Last year, the provincial government brought in Bill 35, the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, and this provided a provincial level of regulation around short-term rentals. That's very similar to the bylaw regulations that Sidney has had in place since 2018. So not many changes were necessary when the bylaw was updated. The zoning bylaw was updated earlier this year. One significant aspect of the legislation is that the provincial requirements are now that hosts provide business license numbers in their online listings. Without a business license, municipalities now have the power to request directly through the province's portal that short-term rental listings be taken down. So it's quite a powerful enforcement tool, and definitely something staff would like to see used for regulating short-term rentals. The bylaw itself is fairly straightforward. It's got a few definition clarifications. It imposes an annual fee for short-term rental business licensing, $200. Note this is an annual recurring fee, unlike the rest of the business licenses in the community, which only pay a one-time fee when they first get their license. And then there's a number of regulations pertaining to the application process, safety requirements, and other conditions for a short-term rental license. Staff have also prepared an application package for business license applicants to utilize to make their application process easier. And staff are proposing that the licensing come into effect, it would come into effect essentially immediately upon the bylaw being adopted, if council does adopt it. But we're proposing that there be a 1-year grace period, essentially from January 2025 to the end of December, to allow short-term rental operators in the community to have enough time to get their business license. And the reason for this 1-year time period is, there's a couple of reasons. One is that staff expect a fairly significant influx of applications, and we'll need time to work through those, so we're anticipating a bit of a queue there. And then on the host side, there may be short-term rentals that require upgrades in terms of building code requirements. So that might be getting a building permit, going through some construction processes, and that takes time as well. Finally, staff are going to communicate to this to both the public generally, so just providing a general sense that a business license is now required for short-term rentals, and we'll also be trying to reach out directly to the hosts themselves, hopefully through the platforms, to advise them of the requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions before we consider the recommendation. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you for the previous questions I sent in. And I just thought of one more, and maybe it's in here when we were talking earlier about parking on Allbay, and it made me think about, maybe it's in the zoning bylaw or the off-street parking bylaw, do we require parking for a short-term rental?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, no, we don't. And the reason for that is because the way that short-term rentals work in Sidney, there needs to be an owner on the property. And so or a permanent resident on the property. And so in the case of someone renting out doing short-term rentals with a couple of bedrooms in their house, we expect that the owner would be there and be sort of guiding the guests when they come onto the property, where to park responsibly and things like that. The other case is where you might have a short-term rental in a secondary suite. In that case, the suite should be legal and as a result should already have a parking space associated with it.
Okay, I'll percolate on that further, and I guess we'll see. It's a year and away till it comes in place, so that's something we could ponder further. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Seeing no further questions, I'd look for a member to move the recommendation. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I'll move bylaw number 2283, amendment number 4, receive first reading.
Second.
All in favor? The motion carries.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
Second reading is moved and seconded. This would be the time for any discussion. Not seeing any discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries.
I'll move third reading.
Second.
All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And that will come forward to a future meeting for consideration of adoption. Thank you. And again, thank you to staff. We're turning to under section number 6, development permits. Under 6A, development variance permit application number DV 100361 at 2104 Colinwood Road to relax subdivision and development bylaw requirements to allow overhead wiring for a new single-family dwelling. We have discussed this at previous meetings. We directed notice to go to area residents. We've received one written submission that is on the agenda packages, and as indicated during approval of the agenda, we've received 2 additional submissions that are considered part of this item. I'll turn to Mr. Edwards, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And my apologies, but there is a correction to the recommendation that's on the agenda. It should be that the application be rejected, not approved. So the staff recommendation was to reject the application, and so my apologies for that error.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards, for drawing our attention to that. As council will recall, that was the staff recommendation in the reports that came forward at previous meetings. Thank you again. And so I would look to a member of council to make a recommendation, please. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I'll move that the application be approved.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to the mover and seconder first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Recognizing the clarification from staff and the discussion that we had previously with respect to this this item, I think certainly at the time when this initially came forward, I was quite keen to see what feedback we get from neighbors. I know one of the late pieces of correspondence was a neighbor who was in support of this moving forward. And I think by way of background, at least my point of view when this was brought forward was that it was perhaps unfair for one resident in this scenario to bear the cost alone of what BC Hydro would have required for this installation. And so with that in mind, I intend to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor O'Keefe?
Yes. I think it's still a good goal. We want to get wiring underground. However, in this case, I found there seemed to be a little bit of confusion in terms of what was the nearest acceptable BC Hydro pole in minds of the individual. And I can understand them potentially thinking if that they had a pole on their property previously and then they replaced it, and BC Hydro said that that pole was okay, that I could see them thinking that it was okay to run the lines till then. Also, the issue of the significant expense without support of other residents or BC Hydro sort of, leads me to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mayor. In this particular one, I'm of two minds. Firstly, I understand that there's a cost associated with it, but there are other people in our community who've had this done and have had to pay various costs, as staff had noted before. And yeah, you could say there was some confusion, and I totally believe that the applicant, it was just an oversight. But as to clarity as to which pole it is, but I would suggest that the time to ask that question is before you sign the building permit, and that was a failure on the part of the applicant. It's quite clear in the building permit what was required, and this was missed. But when you sign the document, those standards are applicable to you at that point in time. You've made an agreement. Where I have a problem is centers around the Telus Pallister. And so, according to the applicant, Hydro had recognized that this had been installed incorrectly, and they would have to take on that cost. And to me, that seems not fair, to put it mildly, that if it's installed incorrectly by either Telus or Hydro, or in combination, whoever made the mistake should correct it, and it shouldn't fall to the property owner to make that cost of that change. But I sit here and I'm still sitting on the fence, because buyer beware. If you sign a document, it's a document, and you're upholden to follow the rules inside of that. So I understand where my colleagues are coming from, but I'm stuck on that point, even though I am concerned about the TELUS aspect. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like my colleague, I'm of two minds. On the one hand, the letter of the law has not been followed precisely. I find that the pole that has been erected there is unsightly. It creates an unevenness in how the hydro poles appear on the street. The applicant has made an attempt to comply with the bylaw by putting that pole on his property and then running an underground line to his residence. So he's tried to comply with the spirit of the law, but then at the same time, I don't feel it's appropriate for our bylaws to force the applicant to pay for BC Hydro's capital costs in replacing a hydro pole, simply because of the timing of his build. And like my colleague, I wonder about that TELUS thing. I think it's unfair and unreasonable to expect homeowners to pay for utilities capital costs. It's one thing to pay the cost of bringing the line to their home. That's to be expected. That's a normal part of building. If it was a developer who was building a subdivision, then yeah, they might have to pay for the erection of hydro poles and all the like utility constructs. But this is a single homeowner, and that's not the case. So in this case, I'm inclined to support the applicant in his endeavors, simply because this is a unique situation, and I feel that punishing him for BC Hydro's lack of their own ability to replace their poles in a timely manner, or at least to support the development of new properties, is an unreasonable burden. So for those reasons, I'll support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I will first ask a question of two questions of staff. The first question is the pole that the applicant has placed on their property close to the property line with the boulevard would be considered a private pole, would it not? It's not a BC Hydro pole.
I believe that's correct.
Thank you. The second is with regards to whatever costs the applicant would have to bear with regards to the work. That is not a negotiation or discussion between the town of Sidney and BC Hydro. It's a discussion between the property owner and BC Hydro.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the motion. The building permit that the applicant signed off on was to provide was to have underground wiring to the nearest BC Hydro pole. The hydro pole that they've connected to is not a BC Hydro pole. It's a private pole on their property. The applicant did indicate that they had developed 3 other properties and were familiar with building permit processes. And so I think the applicant went ahead and incurred expense for the installation of that private pole that, quite frankly, could have perhaps not covered the entire cost, but covered a portion of the cost of connecting to the nearest BC Hydro pole as the building permit indicated. The second is that the negotiation in terms of what costs are reasonable or fair is between, well, council has made reference to that because the applicant made reference to it, is maybe a concern, whether it's the pilaster or whatever part. That's the discussion for an applicant to have with BC Hydro and to, if necessary, seek legal counsel or what have you. It's not the town's responsibility to be involved in the discussion or those costs. I will take note of if this motion that is on the floor is to succeed. One of the submissions that we received in writing provided the suggestion that perhaps BC Hydro could move, given the significant change they're going to make to their pole, or need to make to the pole, that they could actually move the current hydro pole to the right-of-way just in front of where the current private pole is on private property, and that would save the trenching of the neighborhood driveway. Again, that is an item that came out of a submission to council, but it's not council's purview in terms of how the applicant addresses connection to the BC Hydro pole. I'll leave my comments there. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Garnett and myself are opposed. The motion carries. Please go ahead, Councillor Novick.
I would like to move that should BC Hydro replace the pole in question, that at that point in time, the applicant be obliged to comply in entirety with the city's bylaw, with the town's bylaw.
Before I seek a seconder, I'm going to turn to staff to determine or to seek advice whether that is a motion in order. Is it the purview of council to make such a recommendation? Mr. Edwards?
I'm going to have to look to my staff for input on this, Mayor. My sense is that might be a difficult requirement to impose.
Okay. Ms. Verhagen.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I agree with Mr. Edwards' comments on that if council is approving the variance now, there'd be no way a municipality could go back and ask somebody to do something different at a point down the road, at which time we don't know when BC Hydro is changing their infrastructure.
Thank you. Councillor Novick, rather than seek a seconder, I might suggest that the motion's not in order at this time, and you may wish to direct a question to council, to staff offline. And if it were in order, deemed to be in order, that you could certainly bring it forward as a notice of motion at a future meeting.
Fair enough, I'll withdraw for the time being.
Thank you. So we've concluded item 6A on the agenda. I'm now turning to, I would seek a mover and seconder for the adoption of our minutes from our October 28th meeting.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
And seconded. Any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Our next item of business is under number 11, council reports. We'll now turn to Councillor Novick, who is our council representative on the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board of Trustees. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be very brief. This is really a third quarter report. There has been a new Director of Finance hired for Virl, and that person will have started on November the 4th. At the same time, the Assistant Director of Finance, who has been sort of guiding the financial ship in the interim, has departed. The finances are in good shape, big difference from previous year with a slight surplus projected to year end. There was at the last board meeting a very lively discussion over the types of books to be added to the collections, primarily because of some controversy over the book Grave Error. And for those who are unfamiliar with that book, it is a book that I guess succinctly put questions some of the allegations, I guess, at the Kamloops residential school, the ground penetrating radar where they ostensibly found graves, and this book is questioning that, and so our staff have decided not to stock that or put that in the collection. It was quite the discussion, but anyway, that decision stood. A number of Virl's policies have been updated. This is a normal process: respectful workplace policy, prohibition and appeal process policy, and video surveillance policies. Nominations committee has been struck to seek for the coming year a new chair, vice chair, members of executive committee, and audit and finance special committee members. The current vice chair's term is ending, so that seat will be open, and I will be putting my name forward for that vice chair position. The new Masset Library is about a third completed, and they are looking at a spring opening. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you for the verbal report, Councillor Novick. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Seeing none, I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, our liaison to the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea.
Thank you, Mayor. Attended the annual general meeting on October 22nd with Councillor Duck was also present. I'm not going to highlight financial aspects because when they came for their new funding request, they brought that information with them. So visitors to the Centre for 23-24 were 75,425. So I think that's even higher than pre-pandemic. So it was a very good year, and it's glad to see that the Centre is doing so well in visitorship. November of 2023, they held the first ever Pro D Day educational seminar at the Centre, and I think this is going to be something that happens in the future. So for me, this is really great. You have teachers coming in and learning about the Salish Sea, and then they take that information back and share it with their students, and I think that's an important way to get information out to young minds, which plays into the next point I want to make. And they had 11 weeks this summer of summer camps with 112 campers taking part, and they had a visual display of the children that were there, and I couldn't help but think how it's so great at informative years like those where they can start to understand the importance of the biodiversity of the Salish Sea, the creatures in it, and what we need to do to protect it, protect this absolute gem that we're so fortunate to live next to. In terms of the actual exhibits down by the touch pool, if those who have been there, there was a California sea lion skeleton that was on the floor. It has now been raised. It's hanging from the ceiling, not too far from the orca skeleton. And they also now have a new stellar sea lion skeleton, which was donated by the BC Royal Museum. And the staff did a really good job of creating like a rock formation in the corner that you can stand beside it. And I was struck at the opening of it by just the sheer size of the animal. And until you actually see just the skeleton, from the distance they look big, but up close they're pretty massive. The Ascarium, which is the center's Halloween holiday sort of thing that they hold in there. It was held on Saturday, October 26th. They had 920 visitors, and they've been doing this for a few years now. This is the most they've ever had, which is really impressive. The entry is by donation, and they raised $4,877. And it's a 50-50 split. They keep half, and the other half, this year's recipient was the Pepperkin Hout Foundation, and that's means Blossoming Place. It's a Wasanich-based nonprofit that provides land-based learning and ecosystem restoration opportunities. So a fair, good size amount of money went to them, which is great. Helps our community and their community. Year 2 of the Salish Sea Idol fundraiser will be taking place, and it'll start later this month. You can go online to their website and by donation pick what you think is the Salish Sea Idol. This year's candidates are the bald eagle, the salmon, the humpback whale, and the sea star. And these are the subjects of the Drawing Connections exhibition, so there's a connection there. And finally, save the date for a special evening, evening event Saturday, January 25th, to celebrate the Drawing Connections exhibition and raise funds for the center's operations. They're still working on the final details of it. There may or may not be artists there. They may or may not be auctioning off artwork. But there will be selling tickets, and it should be a fantastic event. And if you want to put that in your calendar, if those are the kind of things you like and enjoy. And that's it for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for the very positive update for the Salish Sea, Councillor Garnett. We're now turning to the items under number 12, committee reports. We have 2. The first is under 12A, is the Saanich Peninsula Accessibility Advisory Committee. We are receiving the minutes of their September 26th meeting on the agenda. There are no recommendations. It's for information only, but I will turn to Councillor O'Keefe, our council representative on the committee, if you wish to make any remarks.
Sure. Yeah, no recommendations back to council. I just will highlight that, starting to see once in a while specific development proposals coming to the committee for input. And so the committee members were quite appreciative that the developer came and made a presentation and was very interested in hearing what the committee had to say in regards to the Hovey Road development that was under consideration. That is the one that is still, I think, under consideration, that involved the Legion and seniors. So it was appropriate, I think, for the developer to come forward and get some input from the committee, and they had a lot of good suggestions. And the developer seemed very receptive to the feedback and seemed to go away with realization that sometimes there's things that they don't think about, and looking to maybe tweak their development a bit based on the committee's feedback. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. So now turning to item 12B, and we are receiving the minutes of the Advisory Planning Commission meeting for November the 5th. We are receiving those on our agenda. And I will turn to Councillor Ventura, our liaison to the committee, to either make remarks about the minutes or to move us through the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Mayor. With appreciation to the Advisory Planning Commission, who met to review 2 projects that had been forwarded to them by Committee of the Whole. As is noted in the minutes, the first at 9633 3rd Street was a 2 single family, small lot development. Council will have noted in the record decision that commission members were widely supportive of the requested variances on that project. The second that was reviewed was in relation to 9895 9899 7th Street, a 4-story multifamily residential building containing a total of 21 multifamily dwelling units. And as noted in the record of decision, one of the areas in which was suggested and will carry through to the recommendations from APC was improvements to the form and character on the street entrance way. In particular, their commentary was with regard to the parkade or the parking area entrance, along with the adjacent area to that parkade and entrance of the building, and I believe that the applicant was receptive to those comments in that discussion. Furthermore, as noted in the record of decision, there were certainly some questions and discussion in relation to the variance request. In particular, the setbacks on this property. The applicant had indicated certainly that the design of this building took place prior to the new zoning bylaw having been put into effect, And I think that resonated with APC as an understanding that it's in their estimation, it was a fairly minor variance on that setback that was being requested. And overall, the project was supported by APC. I'll leave my comments on the minutes there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So if you could take us through the two recommendations, please.
I will.
Sorry,
Thank you.
sorry, I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question, if I may. Was there any discussion among members about the location of the balconies in the northeast corner and the fact that they overhang and look right into the home to the north, right into their potential impact on privacy?
I'm going to look to Ms. Verhagen and see if she recollects that discussion coming out of APC. I don't recall anything specifically around the issue of privacy. There might have been some discussion around those balconies on the higher levels of the building, but I don't recall it as being something that registered significantly. Ms. Verhagen, sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul. I'm just reviewing the minutes of the meeting and looking at the record of decision. There's no specific comments in the record of decision about that. I believe one or two members may have made a comment about that, but that would have to be confirmed by watching the video of the meeting, which is on the website. So,
Okay.
sorry. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
That's
Yeah.
okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I'll move the first recommendation. The Advisory Planning Commission recommends, and I so move, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 9633 3rd Street be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV100312 to relax the requirements for the size of an accessory building, and that any written correspondence received before council at the time of consideration and approval of variance. 2, that development permit variance application number DP100827 to permit the form and character of 2 small lot single-family dwellings for the property at 9633 3rd Street be brought before council for consideration and approval if council authorizes the issuance of the development variance permit. 3, that as conditions of approval of development permit application number DP100827, the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of building permit, A, address design guidelines 25.3.19, heat pump location, to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services. B, register a flood hazard covenant on the title of the property referencing the submitted engineer's report. C, install tree protection fencing around the drip line of all off-site trees to be retained to the satisfaction of the town's Parks Department, to be kept in place until such time that all construction on the property is complete, and follow all recommendations in the arborist report prepared by D. Clark Arboriculture dated April 9th, 2024, and D, pay to the town a deposit in the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development.
Second.
It is moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Rintoul, if you could take us through the second recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The Advisory Planning Commission recommends, and I so move, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 9895 and 98997 7th Street be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV100360 to relax the distance exterior cladding is permitted to project into a required setback. The maximum percentage of a first story occupied by the parking area, the location of the required 3-bedroom units, and the minimum front and rear yard setbacks, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration approval of variance. 2, that development variance permit number application number DP100848 to permit the form and character of a 4-story 21-unit multi-unit building for the property at 9895 and 98997 7th Street be brought before council for consideration of approval if council authorizes the issuance of the development variance permit. 3, that as conditions of approval of development permit application number DP100848, the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of building permit A, pay to the town deposit in the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development, and B, make improvements to the form and character of the street entryway. 4, that as condition of approval of development variance permit application number DV 100360, the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of building permit, A, register a restrictive covenant on the title of the property prohibiting the future strata council from passing any bylaws that may restrict occupancy of the building based on age.
We have it moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Councillor Novick seconds. I'll turn to the mover and seconder. Councillor Novick.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, as was noted in the record of the decision on this, there's a lot of discussion. Excuse me, a number of variances requested on this project. But overall, the Advisory Planning Commission ended up being very supportive of the project as a whole. Some of the considerations they would have made if they could, I think, would have been around the property to the north, which we'd had a discussion about a committee of whole, as well as whether or not that property is that truly orphaned in the sense that there is another property further to the north of it that is a smaller scale development as well, and perhaps a vintage in the 80s. And so I think the consensus coming from APC was that their traditional point of view on an orphan property doesn't apply in this case, given that there are actually two properties to the north as opposed to just the one. And of course, the other piece was, as our OCP directs, looking to amenity space, perhaps inside or outside of these projects. In this case, my takeaway from the APC discussion was that there was a understanding, adjacent to a School District 63 property, that there's, green space in the area, and that this project builds out with sufficient parking, I believe, +1 in this instance. And so APC were generally very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Turn to Councillor Novick.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I haven't 100% decided. I think I do want to hear from the neighbors around, so I think that's an important component that I would support it on that basis. I do still have concerns about the front and rear setback. I disagree with APC. I think these are, given the context of the OCP, important, and so I'm on the fence sort of a little bit, but I do want to hear from what the neighbors have to say about it, because they'll be the ones impacted by it. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm not happy about the variances that are being asked for. I don't see myself changing my mind about that after it goes to public opinion. So I guess I'm torn in terms of, do you tell the developer, no, this isn't what we want, and go back to the drawing board, or let it go through the public process. Just as we had talked about as committee of the whole, we just went through an extensive process with a new OCP, the zoning bylaw. Staff put a lot of time, and the council and community, into deciding what do we want our community to look like in terms of setbacks and that sort of thing. And while the APC has mentioned that, well, this was designed prior to the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw, we passed that, back in the spring. The proposed setbacks were out there, they knew about them, so they would have had the opportunity, I think, to make some adjustments at that time. So for those reasons, I'm not supportive of the motion and moving it forward. My preference would be to tell them to go back to the drawing board and come up with something that fits within the setbacks and the zoning bylaw that we spent so much time working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll support this recommendation to receive further possible public input. However, further to my comments that I made at committee of the whole meeting, and didn't necessarily repeat at the following council meeting, is that there are 5 variances associated with this project. I'm supportive, as APC was, of the variance to relax the distance of exterior cladding projecting into as a required setback, it's very minimal and actually adds to the articulation of the building. I'm supportive of the maximum, variance on the maximum percentage of first story occupied by the parking area. I think a reasonable rationale was provided for that, as well as the location of the required 3-bedroom units in the project. I'm supportive of that. Further to other council members making reference to the front and rear setback, I'll remain consistent in my comments that we did go through a lengthy OCP process. This was designed prior to the passage of our zoning bylaw earlier this year, but that bylaw was presented to community previous to that, and there's been some 6 or 7 months since that time that the applicant had time before bringing it to council to redesign. While they may be considered relatively minor setbacks, we are setting a precedent. One of the first precedents, this would be a precedent on one of the first developments under our new zoning bylaw, and the rationale is quite frankly for additional space. As part of the rationale, it is that the front of the property will be consistent with, for example, a neighboring property a couple of blocks down. But while that's a rationale, that's the previous zoning bylaw. And we made a change to a zoning bylaw with intent, with feedback from the community. With regards to there being a field across the street, how long will the field remain a field? The school board owns a significant amount of property there. The chief administrative officer and I met some time ago with the school board regarding that property. There are no particular plans for it at this time, but given the demands and given the changes that School District 63 has made elsewhere on the peninsula, I don't accept that as a rationale. Quite frankly, it's providing additional space for the building. So I do support it going to notice to owners and tenants, but I do continue to have those concerns. I'll leave my comments there, and seeing no further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor O'Keefe is opposed, and the motion does carry. Thank you, Councillor O'Toole, for noting aspects of the APC meeting and taking us through the 2 recommendations. We're now turning to the staff reports under 13, and we have 3 staff reports. The first is under 13A is potential donation of peace pole from 2 Sidney Rotary clubs. We have a report from the Manager of Communications, Ms. Judson, and I would turn to Ms. Judson now for an introduction, please.
Thank you very much. The staff report does outline the key considerations for the proposal. I'll note that staff have identified a potential location for the pole at Seaport Park, as well as an estimated cost for the town to install it, and that would be $2,000. The staff report does not ultimately recommend installation of the pole. In terms of the comments made tonight, it's important to note that the importance of peace has not been overlooked. Rather, the town has a significant monument to peace, the Sanctuary of Peace statue, located in a prominent location along the waterfront walkway where it meets Beacon Avenue. Anytime a new object's added to the waterfront walkway, staff do consider appearance, language, and the use of logos, no matter what the sentiment is and no matter the organization behind the logo. So that's why those things are considered there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. I just have one. There was reference in the presentation made by Rotary to committee, and noted in the staff report that in addition to the Rotary symbol on the pole, and it appears that would be on all 4 sides of the pole, I guess between the message in English and in French, whether it's on one side or multiple sides, but there is also a plaque that will be at the base of the pole with the Rotary symbol on it. Okay, I'm receiving the affirmative on that, so if there are no questions, I would look to a council member to move a recommendation, please. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'll move the staff recommendation that the request that the town install and maintain a peace pole be denied.
Do we have a seconder?
Second for discussion.
Councillor Garnett has seconded. I will turn to the mover and seconder, please.
Thank you. I think staff did a good job at bringing forward some of the things we should think about. Things that resonated for me was reminding us that we already have a monument to peace at the end of Beacon. We have a number of features along the waterway, concern about that there's a limit to the number of languages and how those would be decided on. And I think and for other reasons provided in the report, I think staff's rationale on this makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Garnett?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, not seeing other comment or discussion from others. Councillor Rintoul? As the chair, I generally turn to others first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was inclined to hear from my colleagues' thoughts on this, and I'll acknowledge I hadn't made the relationship between the existing sanctuary piece and the location that had been requested with regard to the Rotary installation, and so I concur with Councillor O'Keefe's comment in the staff report, noting that this may well be redundant in that sense. Obviously, we've seen feedback of the nature that the languages that may be on the pole will be scrutinized, and people will have various opinions on that. In my point of view, not being a connoisseur of art, I would suggest the existing sanctuary piece is perhaps aesthetically a more visually appropriate art installation, and I get the clarification that was made this evening that this is not meant to be an art installation. It's meant to be a beacon, a mindset for people to engage in dialogue and to understand the significance, the prominent location, and the suggestion our community has behind it, and the message of peace, and obviously I'm supportive of that. I'll yield with my rambling at that point and hope that colleagues have thoughts to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Novick, I first saw Councillor Duncan, so next on my speaking is Councillor Duncan, then Councillor Novick, then myself.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I could have probably gone either way on this one, in the sense of whatever, what difference does it make? Who wants to be the council that can then be accused of being against peace if they deny it? On the other hand, why are we going to spend $2,000 a year extra to maintain, well, not to, sorry, to install it, and then some percentage to maintain it, to put up another monument that at this point feels almost like an insult, considering we do have a sculpture to peace. We have a war memorial in front of the town hall where we have a ritual every year where we add additional war veterans to each year, because there are more wars going on in the world right now than there ever have been in history, and that's only been increasing every single year since the Great War, which was supposed to end all war. I can remember the early 90s and being a small child when I finally discovered that the Remembrance Day ceremonies were a lie. I remember the rage I felt, the betrayal that only is like a child can feel in that simplistic sense, because I'm
Councillor Duncan, if you could perhaps speak more directly to the motion.
Sure. So I'm speaking to this motion directly because we had a member of the town come forward and speak at great impassioned length. I assume we will receive perhaps some correspondence about it there was correspondence about the languages that are there. And I think at this particular juncture in history, if people are going to propose things to promote peace, then maybe they should instead go to the Victoria Library and get Active Measures, The Secret History of Disinformation and Political Warfare by Thomas Rid. And then we will disapprove, or we will deny putting in this peace poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I first heard the presentation, I was in favor of it. I thought, well, how bad can it be to accept a peace poll? And I have a lot of friends in Rotary, and I don't want to be the one to say, nah, let's not do it. But the more I think about it and the more I have read staff report on it, the more I realize that much of what we erect around the town has an artistic component, sculptures and so on, and our existing peace monument is artistic in nature. And I wonder too if this isn't more simply a way to promote Rotary. Not that their works are to be questioned, or not that they're not valid, but by providing that pole for us and having their logo prominently displayed on the pole and on the base, they're kind of asking us to market their peace program. And I have some issues with it. The pole is quite basic, it's very simplistic. I think the question of languages is fraught with controversy, and I certainly wouldn't want to pronounce on that. So I'm quite happy supporting the motion as it's been presented, and perhaps if they really do want to make a contribution to the town, they'll think of a sculpture or something that is more in keeping with our existing inventory of monuments that can also represent peace, and perhaps it could be located somewhere else in the town. But as it's presented, I don't feel that we're missing out on anything if we deny this application. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I had myself next on the speaking list. The Rotary, the members of Rotary are longtime, the majority are longtime citizens of the town, and their intentions, they are very well intentioned in terms of the projects that they take on, whether it be the town clock that is out in front of the museum, whether it be the Heart Smart Walk that is on the waterfront, whether it be the donation of the splash park in Iroquois Park some 20 years ago. This is an initiative, the Rotary International and the Rotaries around the world promote peace, and this is a message. I don't know that it's a statement with regards to current world affairs or Remembrance Day or anything of that nature. My preference would be to actually request staff to go back to Rotary to ask if it would be acceptable to them. And my concerns are that the Rotary symbol is on the pole above ground, but it is also on the plaque, and I find it unnecessary to have the Rotary symbol on both the pole and the plaque. Just as that art installation that has a message of peace doesn't have anything in the art, it has a plaque at the foot of the pole, and I think it would be appropriate if to have a pole without the Rotary symbol, but to have the Rotary symbol on the plaque acknowledging that. With regards to the languages, I appreciate that there's many of these poles around the world, but with the current world conflicts, which are numerous, and the number of languages that we have in the world, how do we determine which languages are appropriate to put on the pole? I don't want to even begin to suggest myself what languages. And, it was suggested that maybe we could have a discussion with Rotary and get into that, but how do you decide? And so there was a suggestion or a comment, I think, at the last meeting, it wasn't a resolution, that perhaps our national languages of French and English and Saint Jothan, the language of the Salish people, whose traditional territory we reside, would be appropriate. That would be, I would find that acceptable as a message on the poll. But I don't know if Rotary would be accepting of those changes that I'm suggesting. I find the location to be a reasonable one, and I don't think that something like this, just as the Heart Smart polls, need to be considered works of art in that consideration. So I think it's a very simple, relatively simple design with a relatively simple message. I'll leave my comments there for the moment. Not seeing any other comments, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Myself is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you, and thank you to staff for bringing the report forward. We're next turning to item 13C. As you recall, item 13B was removed and to come back to a future agenda at the beginning of the meeting. And so we're turning to item 13C, which is the interim housing needs report. We have a report from Director of Community Planning, and we'll turn to Mr. Newcomb again, please.
Thank you again. So yes, this report provides an overview of and seeks council approval for the 2024 Town of Sidney Interim Housing Needs Report. So housing needs reports are documents that provide detailed assessment of demographics, household incomes, existing housing stock, latent demand, and other factors that contribute to housing supply and demand in a community. The town completed its first housing needs assessment report in November 2019. In 2023, the province brought in additional legislation updating the requirements around housing needs reports. An interim housing needs report is required by the end of this year, and then a further full housing needs report is required by the end of 2028. So this report fulfills the interim housing need report requirement. I should note that despite some kudos from the community, this is the bulk of this report is actually the 2019 housing needs report, and the province has required that 3 items be appended to that previous housing needs report. The first is an assessment of the next 5 and 20-year housing need. So that's being attached and generated using the HART tool referenced in the report. The second item is a description of actions taken by local government to reduce housing need, and those are listed as well, all the actions the town has undertaken since 2019. And the final item is a statement about the need for housing in close proximity to transportation infrastructure, specifically active transportation infrastructure. Sidney is well covered by bus routes, sidewalks, and things like that, so there's not much of an issue there, but a statement has been included to that effect as well. Specifically the 5-year and the 20-year housing need numbers will be used to inform the upcoming updates to the official community plan and the zoning bylaw in 2025, with the idea that the province is wanting municipalities to essentially pre-zone for that 20-year housing need number to help facilitate housing development. So staff will be using this report in the year ahead. And we've also included a request for a $25,000 budget amount to meet the requirement for the 2028 housing needs report. We definitely will need some consulting assistance with that, given the nature of the data analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions on the report. I'll begin with Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Not so much a question as a comment, and I want to thank you in your. Sorry,
it is a time for questions and comment.
Okay.
Comment usually comes.
Okay, sure, fair enough. I will pose a question out of it. With regards to you're beyond the cost of producing an H&R every 5 years, and you mentioned the different areas that probably are not encapsulated. Would it be a fair statement to say that if the population estimates that they're providing in here and perhaps Chief Mickelson can weigh in on this as well, would result in increased costs in policing and in terms of personnel and fire personnel and probably fire equipment.
I'll turn that question through to staff. Mr. Newcomb.
Thanks for the question. I'd just make a general statement that, you know, as with any growth in the community, you know, whether it's infrastructure or policing needs, you're likely going to see increased demand as population and housing increases as well. Would you like to add to that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something that's been overlooked through all this, so I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Not seeing other questions, I do have one, and I appreciate it would come back at budget time, but just in terms of the completion of the in-depth housing needs report for the end of 2028, do staff anticipate that taking approximately a year? And is the consideration of the $25,000 budget likely to be placed closer to the year of that date? Or is it something that would be worked on gradually over the next 4 years?
Thanks for the question. No, I think that budget item, if it was in the 2028 fiscal year, would be fine. The previous housing needs report, I believe, took 6 months or slightly less, so it's not a huge amount of work. It's just a bunch of number crunching and getting the consultant to do that work. So, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I would turn to colleagues for a member to move the recommendations. They could be moved together unless someone wished to move them separately. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move them together. I'll move recommendation number 1, that Council approve the Town of Sidney Interim Housing Needs Report 2024, and staff be authorized to submit the document to the province and post it on the town's website to fulfill the legislative requirements. And number 2, that an amount of $25,000 for the completion of a 2028 housing needs report be included in the draft 2025 to 2029 financial plan and be brought forward to 2025 budget deliberations.
I'll second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any discussion? Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor Novick. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I just want to thank staff for bringing this forward, including the housing needs report that was done a few years ago, and the additional work that was required to meet the provincial requirements. I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And we're turning to item 13D. We have a budget variance report to the end of third quarter or so of 2024. We have a report from the Director of Finance, so I'll turn to Mr. Hissik for that introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This budget variance report covers approximately the first 3 quarters of this year. And year-to-date operating results are presented up to the date of this report rather than just the 9-month mark, which might put several functions over the anticipated 75% mark for the year. The budget for personnel costs, for example, is closer to 81% for the year-to-date rather than the 75%. Which might inflate some of the figures and make them look worse than they really are. On the operating side, we're doing reasonably well for the year, all in all. Investment revenues and savings on the RCMP contract should ensure we come in under budget overall. This would mean that we don't need to draw on the full $450,000 of surplus that we used to balance the budget and keep the tax increase as low as possible. However, we will be drawing on a portion of surplus to fund the CAO transition, as that was a specific one-time use, but it will be less than anticipated at budget time. The capital budget has seen significant activity with 60 of the 100 projects either completed or in progress. Furthermore, planning is underway for some of the projects that have not yet seen any direct costs. We expect to complete several more projects between now and the rest of the year, but as per usual, some projects will be carried forward for completion to next year. In the extensive report, we've included 68 detailed notes on various operating and capital items, but we'd be pleased to address any questions that might remain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hissik. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions of the in-depth report. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Not so much a question, maybe just a comment or suggestions. I'm looking at the parks and the increased costs, and that's something that seems to come up annually. And I understand that, you know, staff's comments about trying to maintain the increasing high standards that residents are expecting from us, and possibility of coming forward with a bump in the budget for parks to reflect that. And I guess what I would be interested in seeing at budget time, knowing that we have significant budget pressures coming in the near future, instead of just continuing to increase the budget, I'd be interested in receiving more information on what are those increasing high standards that we're meeting, and is it time for us to revisit whatever those high standards are. So I'm not sure what the high standard is, so I'd be interested at budget time in getting some more information about that and why things are increasing the way they are. I remember during COVID, it was reasonable that there was significant cost because parks, they're picking up more garbage, people were outside more, a number of different things. So I'm interested in getting more info on that, and if we maintain the budget level for parks as it was, how would that impact service levels? So just a suggestion and a request for at budget time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe, for those comments. Any further discussion? I have one question, and that is under the under A8, fire protection. It indicated the reasons for for increased costs, particularly with the call volume for the department remaining high, and the implementation, sorry, I've lost where it is in the report. Sorry, the department was mandated to meet new provincial expanded scope of practice for first responders, and that information had been provided, perhaps it was at budget time earlier this year. My question through staff to perhaps the chief is, could provincial expanded scope of practice be increased further, placing increased demands on the department?
To the mayor, that's possible, but this increased scope was the first substantive increase of scope probably in a decade. So the likelihood of us having to incur that or take that on, I would say, within the next 5 years would be very unlikely.
Thank you. I'll just comment. Sorry, there is no recommendation. We're receiving this for information, so I'll just make a comment now. Well, so I'll turn first to Councillor O'Keefe and then finish with a comment.
Okay, thank you. On the same topic of fire protection, and I guess in the same spirit as the parks discussion, my recollection is that there's different types of calls that we have to attend, and then there's some that we have some discretion with. I'm not sure what they are. And so I'm not looking for an answer right now, but I would be interested at budget time in hearing more in terms of fire protection services if we were to change our protocol in terms of what calls we attend to. What impact would that have on our budget and the corresponding impact on safety and other issues in the community? So I'd be interested in hearing more on that at budget time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, I'll just quickly respond that I believe in the past we have articulated the breakdown of MESA calls, which are medical emergency service assist calls that we do attend. We only attend what we would consider the higher acuity calls. We don't attend like lower acuity calls, base falls, simple fractures. You know, obviously these seem like significant events to the individual, but we don't attend all of those. It's more a factor of our demographics, and I think in our previous report it showed our demographics is that these higher acuity calls, whether they're chest pain, various unconscious states, short of breath, that's the town we live in. And if we decided that we wanted to lessen the amount of those calls we responded to, we really wouldn't be providing service to our most popular cohort of residents. So I'm happy to provide that in future budget, but that's kind of the Coles Notes version of how we decide what calls we go to.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I just want to thank staff, both Mr. Hissick and Ms. Chan, who's in attendance this evening and has done a lot of this work. This report is I find very helpful to me as an elected representative. I believe my colleagues do as well. And to members of the public, my comment is that if you want to see the very wide breadth of services that we provide in our community, looking through the various line items and how they're presented in this report, along with, and I'm forgetting the number Mr. Hissick said, 60 some odd notes with regards to those individual line items. It's an education about the operations of our community and where our priorities and what the expectations are of everyday service. So, and I appreciate staff, coming forward to indicate, for example, the pressures under sewer operations and storm drains and rising costs just to maintain those systems are rising for factors beyond our control. And as we have a growing population, demands will increase on our limited number of parks, but I appreciate comments from council and the considerations we may give at council meeting, and thanks to the fire and emergency department for being able to mitigate through control of other budgets while facing pressures to internal savings are expected to offset most, if not all, of those costs. So I'll leave my comments there, and that item is now completed. We'll turn to the next item on the agenda, which is noting that we have one item of correspondence remaining under correspondence for information. We're receiving that on our agenda. We're not making any reference to that this evening. And we will turn to Councillor Garnett with appreciation to read our motion to go in camera, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters regarding personal information about identifiable individuals who hold or are being considered for appointments, and discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service pursuant to section 90.1 and K of the Community Charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. All in favor? The motion carries. If a mover and seconder to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And council will reconvene at